Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Greenbelt Alliance program on wildfire and greenbelts, saving Sonoma County. I'm Terry Shore. I am the Regional Director for the North Bay for Greenbelt Alliance, and I'm based in Santa Rosa. We also have with us our Corporate and Foundation Relations Manager, Paris Badat, in the background, who is managing the webinar and the technical issues. You can't see her or hear her, but she's here. We're very grateful for that. So just to give you a little bit of idea of the program for this afternoon, we will be taking questions at the end of the program using the Q&A box that you should be able to see on your screen. So you can just enter your questions as you go, and we will take as many of them as we can at the end. So Greenbelt Alliance is really excited to partner with the Town of Windsor City Councilwoman Deb Fudge and Deputy Fire Chief Matt Gustafson of the Sonoma County Fire Protection District, who will be sharing their frontline experiences of how Greenbelts and smart growth helped save lives and homes from wildfire devastation. Deb Fudge was first elected to the Town of Windsor Council in 1996 and has served multiple times as the mayor. She worked with Greenbelt Alliance to pass a voter-approved urban growth boundary in Windsor that we also worked together to renew in 2017, just as the Tubbs wildfire hit Sonoma County. Deb served on the Greenbelt Alliance Public Policy Committee and is currently on the board of SMART. She is a green building consultant and former PG&E environmental specialist. Matt Gustafson is Deputy Chief of the Sonoma County Fire District. He has served on the front lines of the 2019 Kincaid Fire and 2017 Tubbs Fire in Sonoma County. He has over 37 years of public safety experience in private, city, and special fire districts. He was previously Battalion Chief, Fire Marshal for the Town of Windsor's Fire Protection District, and Rincon Valley Fire Protection District Manager. So we have some really great experience with us today. Before I turn it over to Deb and to Matt, I'm going to just provide you a Greenbelt overview and also context for our discussion about wildfires and Greenbelts. Many of you know us, but for those who don't, Greenbelt Alliance is a nonprofit environmental policy and land use planning organization that has worked in the San Francisco Bay Area since 1958, a long time. We work to protect the region's open spaces and make sure that cities grow in a way that creates great neighborhoods for everyone. So Sonoma County is one of the nation's best examples of how we can work together to preserve ag land and open spaces and promote city-centered growth. Sonoma County didn't get to be the gem of the Bay Area by accident. Sonoma County has several very important voter-approved measures, including community separators, which is 53,000 acres of land, such as you see here, vineyards, open space, ag land, that can't be developed without a vote of the people. And the corollary to that are the urban growth boundaries. Every city in the county of Sonoma has a voter-approved urban growth boundary that contains sprawl and protects open space. So here is a map giving you a visual of the community separators. On the left, 53,000 acres that we expanded in 2016. These are all the green areas. Here's Highway 101 going through Sonoma County. Here's Windsor. And on the right, you have the urban growth boundaries around the cities. So it's kind of like yin and yang. The urban growth boundaries keep the cities intact, and the community separators create green buffers all around them. And here we have Windsor up here, for those of you who aren't familiar. Here's Santa Rosa, and Petaluma's down there. So we have this fantastic legacy of protecting open space. And then, oopsie, something bad happened. And then into the mix, suddenly we have wildfires. Wildfires in 2017, 2018, and 2019 changed everything in Sonoma County. Until then, most of us, except for the fire professionals and elected officials in the North Bay, to be honest, we're not giving wildfire a lot of attention or paying a lot of attention to wildfire risk. It was kind of happening in the background. Even though there had been fires around the state of California for decades, and several very scary fires next door in Lake County, you know, until it really comes to your doorstep and you experience it firsthand, like Deb and Matt, and also myself. I live in Sonoma Valley, and we all got to know people who had lost their homes and lives. It gets your attention, to say the least. Since Greenbelt Alliance is a policy organization, since then, we've been thinking a lot about wildfires and wildfire resiliency. And so one of the questions we had is, did our community separators and urban growth boundaries help, you know, stop the fires, or at least help prevent wildfires? So this is the question that we've been exploring. And this is my last slide. One of the, we've done quite a bit of research, oopsie. Sorry about this. We've done quite a bit of research in the past few years on fire science and policy. And one of the experts who we did consult with is Alexander Sifford, who has been conducting wildfire research around the state for a number of years. And while there are very many important findings from her and others in the fire science world, this is the one that really caught our attention. And the bottom line of this graph is that the highest risk for loss of life and home to wildfire is for medium density housing in the wildland urban interface. So this begins to support our hypothesis that UGBs and protected greenbelts are key to reducing wildfire risk for communities. We believe that one of the best examples of this is how the UGBs help save communities in Sonoma County, specifically in the town of Windsor during the Kincaid Fire. So I am now going to turn it over first to Deb Fudge and to Matt, for them to share their on-the-ground stories about their experiences in the town of Windsor. So let me go to Deb.
Hi, everybody. I'm glad to see so many of you here today. And so I thought I'd give a little bit of background on Windsor while we're getting to my slide. Windsor is, as Terry said, 60 miles north of San Francisco, and it's between Santa Rosa and Healdsburg. We're now a town of 28,000 people. This is what our downtown and town green looks like now, but there's quite a history to Windsor, and I'll tell you a little bit about it. The original settlers here were the Lytton bands of Pomo Indians. There were a few different Lytton bands of Pomo Indians who are now, again, living in Sonoma County. And then it was settled, I'll just say in the 1850s, it was settled by others. And it was primarily, but at that point in time, lots of oak woodlands, and it really looked like Windsor, England, near Windsor Castle, and that's how we got the name Windsor. We have a train that runs on the west side of town. Passenger service will start again in 2021. And Old Redwood Highway bisects Windsor on a diagonal, and that was the original highway before Highway 101 that connected everybody along the north coast. In 1980s, this is the beginning of Windsor's history, we had explosive growth, And believe it or not, we had 1,000 homes a year being built in the years 1989 and 1990. And Windsor was not yet a town. We were unincorporated in the county. And the county was just sort of throwing so many homes up here without a high school and without, adequate services, that the citizens decided to incorporate. So we voted to incorporate Windsor as an official city in 1992. But to confuse everybody, we kept the town name because we wanted to keep our small town character. So Windsor has more people than the city of Kincade, the city of Sonoma, Healdsburg, and Cloverdale. They're called cities, but we call ourselves a town. Next slide. So this was our first, we did our first general plan as a city in 1995. And this was where our original sphere of influence was. It's a little hard to see because this is sort of an ancient map in Windsor's history, but you can see, I want you to focus on the area where it says north of Arata at the top, where it's all sort of hatch marked. And there you go, that area. And to the east of that is Foothill Park. And that will play a huge, it'll play into Matt's story about how the fire entered Windsor. So this was our original sphere of influence in our original general plan. And the first council set a growth management ordinance of 350 homes per year. They thought going from 1,000 homes a year to 350 was pretty good. But the citizens didn't like that. They said that's still too much growth because there were still a lot of homes being built. So next slide. So in 1996, there became a new town council with a new environmental majority, and that's where I entered the picture. I became the third person on that council to want to control growth, build a downtown, and create an urban growth boundary. Growth was still a major concern here. We changed the growth management ordinance to 150 homes a year, which still stands today. Although with the fires and with COVID and with the Great Recession of 2008, we've only been building like 5 or 10, but the most we can build is 150 homes a year. We built a new downtown that you saw in the first slide. We won a National Sierra Club Award for that. We have a town green, we have mixed use, transit-oriented development, and we rebuilt our old train station because we're getting ready for the SMART train. In 1998, we instituted a voter-mandated urban growth boundary, and we removed 300 acres from the original sphere of influence up at north of Arata. And so now you can see the line drop down right there. Those acres were all removed from our urban growth boundary, which meant that we have 800 fewer homes now in Windsor than we would have. So in that little area, and this is going to play into the fire story of the Kincaid Fire, there's a vineyard planted. And we believe that vineyard helped to slow the Kincaid Fire from entering Windsor from the north. And Matt will tell you, we had fires on a couple different fronts, at 1.3 different fronts, but that was one of the fire was north of us, heading toward the north and east part of Windsor. And we believe that vineyard helped to slow the fire. Foothill Park, which is off to the east, and Matt will show you photos of that, is where the fire actually entered Windsor backyards. Next photo, next slide. So this is sort of the suburban part of what Windsor looks like now when you're not looking at our downtown. And this is a drone photo, and can you see in the background, that was the Kincade Fire that was starting. So it was pretty far away from us at that point in time in the mountains, northeast of Geyserville. And it started, we think a jumper fell from a PG&E power line. But the fire was heading our way. We weren't worried on this particular day, although any of us who live in Sonoma County still have PTSD from the Tubbs fire. But a couple days after this photo was taken by drone, by a Windsor resident, we had to evacuate Windsor. We had to evacuate 28,000 of us, and we were given about 5 hours to evacuate, and we did it. And we're really proud of how well and how orderly we evacuated. The streets were silent. People were just in cars leaving town with everything they could put in their cars with their possessions, as much as they thought they needed to take. Little did we know that we would be out of our homes for 5 days. Little did we know that we could lose all of Windsor. Matt will tell you this, but the mayor and I were in the Emergency Operations Center one night, the next night with Matt. And at midnight, he said to us, I think we're going to lose Windsor. And we looked at him and said, what do you mean? And we said, all of Windsor? And he said, all of Windsor. If we can't make the stand in the north of Windsor, but primarily at Foothill Park, if the fire people couldn't make the stand there, the fire would keep going. They wouldn't be able to stop it, and it could march all the way to the ocean, which is about 20 miles away, with no barriers to stop it. And if they couldn't also stop it at Highway 101. So this was very serious, and Windsor was almost completely lost. And this is just sort of a partial picture of Windsor, but it gives you an idea of how many more people could have been affected. So now what I'm going to do, now that I've given you the background, is I'm going to hand this off to Matt, and he'll tell you the story with lots of amazing photos and pictures, and from his viewpoint, being the deputy fire chief on the ground during the Kincaid fire.
Thanks. Go ahead with the next slide. Hello, everybody. First off, I just want to give you a little snapshot of the fire district, because the town of Windsor actually does not have a fire department. The fire district has served the town for many years. And in fact, I served as a fire marshal, and I felt like I was a member of the town for many years. But we've recently gone through a tremendous amount of changes and consolidations, pushed and a great deal because of the fires. And we're a brand new fire district. We're established in April 2019. So we are pretty new to the world, but our districts that consolidated were 50 or 60 years old. So we have a lot of rich history, and we have a lot of new history. We cover, to give you a perspective from Deborah's map, we cover from Memorial Bridge in Healdsburg all the way down to the Grayton Casino in Roner Park, and including the Grayton Casino, and from Geyserville and the Russian River all the way to the Napa County line. So we're a pretty large fire district now. We respond to fires throughout the state, and unfortunately, a trophy that I'm not that proud of is two of the largest fires in the state history were in our districts. They actually burned through our district. So, so some big fires in our area. Next slide. Next slide. So I won't go through all this, but a lot of people ask me, what's the difference between the Kincade fire and the Tubbs fire? And there's a tremendous amount of similarities, but the biggest difference is in Kincade, there were absolutely no deaths. There were some injuries, but there were no deaths. In Tubbs fire, there were 22 people died, and there were 4 or 5 times the amount of damage done. And some of the differences between the fires was, one fire started in Napa County and burned into Sonoma County. That was a big difference. And the other one, the Kincade fire, started in the county. So a little bit more notice, a little bit more heads up. But both fires started real late in the fire season. Both were in October. Both were late in the summer. Both started kind of late at night, around 10 o'clock at night. And both were considered firestorms. And I'll explain what that is here in a little bit. So next slide. So fire weather is an important thing for us, and I think for many years we took fire weather very seriously. We considered fire weather something that we needed to pay attention to. But in the last 5 to 10 years, we consider fire weather an opportunity to staff up, to ramp up, and to do other things to be prepared. Here in Northern California, we get Diablo winds. Those are winds 25 miles an hour or greater. And humidity less than 15%, and poor humidity recovery overnight. Those are all factors for red flag days. When we get red flag days, unlike a few years ago, we really ramp up. We do things much differently today, and we learned that from the Tubbs fire. All right, next slide. So this is a video, but I can't show the video today, but if you go back one more, if you look to right here, this is the fire starting. This fire was actually spotted and reported by a fire camera. Fire cameras have been put throughout Sonoma County after the Tubbs fire. And these cameras not only spot these fires, but they can give the dispatchers the coordinates. off to your right here, this is the first responding emergency vehicle. And you can see there are no other lights in this area. This is truly a rural fire. Next slide, please. So the orange to the top is the Kincade fire, and the red to the bottom is the Tubbs fire. You can see the Kincade fire was much larger than the Tubbs fire, but a lot less destructive. And as Deborah indicated, that the fire burned up to city lines. It burned up to the Healdsburg city line by the Russian River, maybe a little bit more in the incorporated area, certainly to the Geyserville area. Evacuation started early in the Geyserville area, and eventually down to the Windsor area. And that blue dot, by the way, that's Deborah's house. Just to let you know. No, actually, that's our EOC. So our EOC and our fire station was in harm's way. So this fire was heading our way real quickly and doing lots of devastation. To your left over here is the Pacific Ocean. And this right here is the Russian River that starts, it goes through our entire town and goes out to the ocean. And that was going to be the predicted fire travel. Next slide. So yes, as Deborah indicated, evacuating a town is no easy decision. And it was a very difficult thing. And in fact, when the fire first started, it was 16 miles away from town. I drove up to a ridge I often drive to when fires start in the county, and I look a long ways, and my son was with me, and he goes, "We better go home and evacuate." And I even said to him, "No, I think 16 miles away is not going to be a harm to us." But right after the fire began, evacuations started in Geyserville and North Healdsburg. And there were a ton of indicators coming our way that the fire was going to reach Windsor. The least thing I wanted to do was to tell the town mayor and Deborah and the council that the fire is going to entrench on Windsor. But the models that the fire research people were coming up with, the local knowledge that I have and my crews have, all the indicators were saying that was coming to Windsor. So evacuation orders were decided to be given to Windsor, and that happened Saturday morning. Next slide. So this slide tells it all. So you can take a lot of criticism for evacuating a town or a community. But if you look at this slide, this was Saturday morning when we asked for the town to be evacuated. Right here is Healdsburg. This is all the mountains above Geyserville, the Calpine area. This is the town of Calistoga over here. This is the Lake County Napa line. This is Windsor right here. And if you were to follow my cursor all the way down towards where it says Pacific Ocean, that is the Russian River corridor. The Russian River corridor would absolutely host a large fire all the way out to the ocean. All right, next slide. So Deborah talked about where the fire was easily more contained. And this is looking on a Arata drive towards Windsor. And on the left is a rural area with vineyards and grazing and a pretty significant green belt. On the right is the Ellsbury subdivision full of homes, absolutely packed full of homes. So this is a really good slide to show where the separation was. All right, next slide.
Can I just add, that's the vineyard I was talking about in the urban growth boundary, same one.
So correct, that was a vineyard, but just up the street from the vineyard is this neighborhood. This is called Brooks Road. This is north of Windsor. This is just slightly out of the town of Windsor. This actually is a daytime photo. This fire just ripped through there. There was tremendous fuel. There's tremendous overgrowth in that neighborhood, in that street. And that was really a tough battle to save homes in that area. The lights on that fire engine are actually upward because so that aircraft can see them through the smoke. So a quick funny story about that, if I could just maybe bring some humor to this. These folks were from Anaheim, and after the fire was over, I came up to them. I went to a lot of the engine companies and I thanked them for helping us. And I said, so you're from Anaheim, you must be the happiest fire department on earth. I thought it was hilarious, but they didn't think it was that funny. But anyways, next slide. So this is in the Foothill subdivision. This is where, this backs Foothill Park, where Deborah showed you the slide. This was heavy vegetation in the park. The park had not had any fires in many, many years other than small fires. This made a firefight quite difficult. The reason we were able to stop the fire here were a whole bunch of things, which I'll end with, but we had a lot of resources on this fire, not only on the head right here, but also downstream, because our big problem with these fires, these 25-mile-an-hour gust winds, is downstream embers. We could be fighting this fire and you can see everyone's focused on the fire, but we could have another fire a mile or so downstream starting to take traction. That lies our biggest challenge right now in these fires, these urban fires. Next slide. So you can see from this slide here, the fire burned right up to these homes and these subdivisions and in between the homes. The slide to the right is a firefighter fighting in between fires. This fire was stubborn, it was windblown, it had a lot of fuel. This is a beautiful neighborhood. This is a well kept up neighborhood, but still this fire really wanted to entrench on this neighborhood. Above this red roof, what I call the red roof neighborhood, is Foothill Park. Foothill Park had not burned in years. It was full of fuel. It was ready to burn that day. Okay, next slide. This is just from another angle. This is a Tom Rennie photo from his drawing. He's a Windsor resident. So this is all Foothill Park. This is sort of an HOA walking area in between two subdivisions. As you can see, you got the Foothill over here, and then you have another subdivision over here. This fire really wanted to penetrate. So just little things like this green belt right here, you can see it's fine, and golf courses are fine. Off to the right, you can see over here a vineyard, which is fine. It's not to say that green belts stop fires, but certainly slow fires. Next slide. So green belts with things like prescribed burns, fuel management, healthy groves, they certainly serve as buffers. Agriculture areas, vineyards, pastures, golf courses, grazed lands certainly serve as buffers. We are fortunate that a lot of our urban growth interface has these buffers. This is a photo of Chalk Hill, which is behind Windsor to the to the east. And you can see that this vineyard burned, but they burn less aggressive with less ember cast. Communities backing wildland areas too. I'm just going to throw this in as a plug if there's any city planners out there. The town of Windsor took pretty a noble approach to this after the fire, that we asked the town of Windsor to consider not a WUI building standard within the town limits, but a modified WUI standard within the town limits. We're kind of calling this the warm zone. So it's not, these houses aren't in the WUI area, but they're in harm's way for a wildland fire. And so the town agreed to that. And so there's a higher level of building standard within the town of Windsor for new homes. And there's some pretty significant subdivisions planned for this, what I call this warm area, for lack of a better terminology. All right, next slide.
Did you want to mention the point you have here about the two types of fires? Or did you cover that?
Yeah, that's great. I'm sorry, I did pass over that. So I do want to make it a point of, you could have the urban growth boundary, but we're finding in what I call mega fires. These are the fires that are late in the season, as I mentioned earlier. The vegetation is very dry. There's been no rain for months. There's been baking periods where the area is baked with a lot of days of high heat, low humidities, and then you get your red flag days. These are fire storms. The only way to stop these firestorms is tremendous amount of resources and aircraft and on the ground. The typical fires, 100 acres or less, or within a few hundred acres, these buffers are very useful and almost always help us stop fires. So how the fire was stopped at Windsor, there's a lot of things that we're still looking at how it stopped. One of the most significant reason why we were able to stop the fire at Windsor, and this is a key point, is there were no other large fires in the state of California. That's huge. If you have more than a couple fires in the state of California, especially late in the season, which is frequently, you have to beg and steal and try to get resources to your fire. We had plenty of resources. We had hundreds of strike teams. We called for them early, we secured them, we placed them, and we got them what we call in surges. We were able to really put a lot of resources on the ground. We had plenty of engines on, in, like, for example, the Foothill Subdivision, we had an engine almost on every other driveway to every other third driveway. That's unheard of, to be able to put on resources out like that. So we were really able to do that. Effective evacuation is probably the biggest thing that we learned between the difference between the Tubs and the Kincade was we got to get people out. We absolutely got to get them out. We got to get them out early. And so we've increased technologies with Nixle and with SoCo Alert and with reverse 911 and with the sheriff's office and the high-low sirens. All of that was deployed in the Kincaid fire. This fire also happened, or the evacuations, I should say, happened on a weekend day, which was helpful. We had a little bit of time, although this fire moved quickly towards Windsor, only in a matter of a few days. We had a few days to start thinking about evacuations. We had a time to really put these resources out there. Little thing about local knowledge, in the Marin County dozer crew put a dozer crew in the Foothill Park early. The Foothill Park actually does a dozer line around the park every year anyways. But having local knowledge, we requested this dozer division to go in the park and do a larger line. I think that was a big help, as well as doing a lot of backburning and dozer line work in Chalk Hill, which is our urban wildland interface. We did receive some favorable fire conditions by that day, but not much. We were still dealing with high winds. And absolutely, as Deborah alluded to, buffers such as the Hillview Vineyards, which is to our north of town, and the Chalk Hill Vineyards, which is to our north, or sort of to the south of our town. So next slide. So I think that's about it. So I think that's about it with my presentation.
Well, that was fantastic, very insightful, and we will take some of the questions now. Let me see.
The last slide, Terry.
Oh, sorry.
I didn't think that got in there, so.
Oh, there actually are a couple more slides. I don't know why it wouldn't advance. Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, I thought there were a couple more, but so that's good, because this is a really great slide. So you see, this is this is a helicopter video that we took after the fire was out, and we flew the whole entire area and we looked at the Greenbelt areas. But as you can see from down here, you still have fire entrenching on the town. This whole area here is a creek bed with lots of vegetation. This burned very aggressively. This here had less timber area and more what we call flashy fuels, and it burned real aggressively. And then of course you have your lake areas up here, and you see a vineyard up here on the top of the hill. And is there one more slide?
That one.
Oh.
So this is an event that we organized after, I think it was the week after the fires. Windsor wanted to thank all of the first responders who helped us. We had National Guard guarding the entrances to our town. Nobody could come back in. You had to show, I could go in with special IDs, but I had to go through 4 checkpoints to be able to get back into town. So we wanted to thank the National Guard, the CHP, I think Matt will tell you, but we had 200 fire trucks in town at one point from everywhere from Pasadena, all over the state. And so these were 5,000 residents who showed up based on some Facebook posts, made their own signs to thank all the first responders. And we sort of had a gathering. And this instance really brought the town back together and created and furthered our small town character. So we just wanted to show you, especially there's signs in there. You can see Foothill Neighborhood thanks you because they were the ones primarily impacted. But we just wanted to thank all the first responders, and all of us have this photo framed in our homes right now.
Well, thank you so much, Deb. That is a very impressive photo, and people really pulled together in Sonoma County on these fires. So we do have some questions. Let me see if I can take them. There is a question, and I don't know exactly what it's referring to, but it says something about what is the RH level in the last slide. That was early on, RH level. That's probably for you, Matt.
That's relative humidity. So relative humidity below 15%, along with dry temperatures and wind, especially wind, creates a red flag condition. So it's relative humidity.
There were a couple of questions about the Diablo winds and which direction they come from, and the Diablo winds come from the east, do they not?
Correct, and they're the same as the Santa Ana winds. We just call them Diablo up here, but they're the same winds. They're the winds that go towards the ocean, basically. And when you have upslope western exposure hills like we do in Sonoma County, you have a lot of time where the sun bakes on those hills. So when you get those wind conditions, it will create conditions where fire burns very aggressive downhill as opposed to uphill when you usually get the aggressive fires. So we call them the Diablo winds.
Well, thank you. Here's another more complex question from Rashenda Blaker. Could you please say more about vegetation, healthy tree growth as buffer? I've heard more about the need to clear vegetation, fuel management, yet have heard 3 personal stories of fires stopping at a line of trees or vegetation. Do you have a comment on that? And I think that's Jenny Blaker. Hi, Jenny.
Hi, Jenny. So yeah, that's both that's quite common and accurate for that matter. So when a fire burns up to a grove of oak trees, for example, assuming the oak trees are healthy, yes, a fire will slow at heavier timbers. When you have a grassy hill or what we call flashy fields, then those fields will burn a lot more aggressively. So yes, that's correct. Some of the best things we could be doing as Californians is getting rid of dry, dead, non-native vegetation and clearing out duffs underneath trees. Ironically, I get this question in a little different form. I get it in that now the fire burned through, we don't have a fire threat anymore here, right? Because we burned everything, all the vegetation. And ironically, now we get higher grass crop in the winter, and it dries out in the summer because all those areas that the trees and the vegetation was covering is now exposed to the sun. So we get a higher crop of grass. So no, now we get faster, more aggressive fires too, because we have the wheat crop that burns faster.
Thank you. So here's a question from Cody Cifuentes Winter. You mentioned that Greenbelts and ag can slow and or stop regular fires. Do they provide buffers against the mega fires?
Yes and no. So as I talked about embercast, and embercast is a lot more about because with these high winds and these gusty fires, or gusty winds with fires, we're finding a lot more downstream fires occurring, especially if you go back to the Tubbs fire, that's exactly how Coffey Park was started on fire, because Coffey Park was a freeway, a 6-lane freeway, a shopping center parking lot, and a mobile home park away before it's reignited in a neighborhood called Coffee Park. So it's these embers that are traveling further. So if you have a very large buffer, then it's less likely that you're going to have these ember caused fires. So that's what I meant by that. So yes, they can. If you have a little green belt, or you have ember that lands in a vineyard and then that ember is picked up and put into a subdivision or another area that has heavier fuels, then you're going to get more of these spot fires.
Yeah, it's complicated. It isn't black and white.
No, but see, in the Kincade fire, we were able to put engines all over neighborhoods. In my neighborhoods, which was easily half a mile away from the Foothill subdivision, there were engines in my neighborhood, and they were looking for these spot fires. And they were doing things like taking garbage cans and things away from your house and putting them out in the middle of the street so that those would not ignite with embers.
Wow.
So tactics and strategies have changed quite a bit, but it takes a tremendous amount of resources to do that.
So we have a few more questions here. We're getting close to 1 o'clock, but I think if we have time, we'll take a couple more. A lot of them are very specific and similar questions. This is from Letitia Grenier. Can you explain exactly how the green spaces help slow fires? It seems like they have fuel loads. Is it that the fuel loads are less than in suburban developments?
Yes, in fact, I will get you a great video that we flew over the Mayacamas golf course, and you can see that's a beautiful, very large golf course, and you can see that the fire burns up to the golf course and the cabins around the golf course, but then stops and takes a different path. But if it gets a good wind, then the ember cast will go over the Greenbelt area and start the vegetation on the other side. But that's what we see, and that's what that last photo showed a little bit too, of the fire burning in the vineyard.
So thank you. And then here's a question from Jeff Morris. How much coordination is there between individual cities and the county with land use planning, growth boundaries, and how they impact fire protection and prevention? I don't know if you want to take that one, Deb, or both of you want to comment, because it kind of relates to both of you.
Yeah, I'll just take the town city part, and then Matt can talk about the huge amount of work that's being done with consolidation of fire districts and fire departments right now. But the cities worked together to create all these urban growth boundaries in Sonoma County. We actually went and walked precincts in each other's cities and helped each other. If one city went forward with a boundary, then the other city went to help. And so there's been a lot of coordination that way. Since the Tubbs fire in 2017, there were so many lessons learned that the cities and county get together constantly. We have meetings every other month and work together to decide, you know, how we can prevent this from happening in the future. And if it does happen, how we can do things like evacuate and where the resources would be and where the shelters would be and things like that. So there's way more coordination, I would say, in the last 3 years than there was before the devastation in the Tubbs fire. And Matt can talk a lot about the coordination done through the fire districts.
Yeah, agreed. We have one dispatch system for the entire county, for the entire fire district. We meet with all the other fire agencies. Consolidation certainly helped with having several less fire agencies. Partnering, the town doesn't have a fire department, but we very much feel like we're part of the town. They invite us to a lot of meetings, the urban growth meetings. You have to have your fire marshal at these planning meetings. You have to include your fire department in these planning meetings for urban growth boundaries and developments and stuff. And the town's always seen that as an advantage. So we are involved in that. We have a say at those meetings. And I think that's a very important takeaway of that.
Yeah, that's very good to hear. Let me ask one more question, and then we can decide if we want to go over our time a little bit or not. This is from Karen Mackey. Can you tell us more about the building standards for the WUI in near Windsor and the warm WUI? What are they and how are they different?
Okay, so WUI standards is a chapter in the fire code that applies to homes in areas that are designated high severity fire zones. Windsor has none of those, but areas around Windsor, there are high severity zones. So those are pretty, those are non-combustible roofs, non-combustible siding, certain venting, windows, everything. And even with WUI standard houses we found in Fountain Grove, they burned down too, because that whole area on top of Fountain Grove during the Tubbs fire burned. And those are all WUI homes. So they don't necessarily protect a house in a mega fire like that. But they do definitely protect the house in so-called routine fires. The town took a noble approach of saying, we're not going to make them do WUI standards within the town limits, but we're going to make sure that they have the proper roofs, the proper siding, and fences. Fences are a big problem in these fires, and I believe are a big contributor to house burning. And if we can eliminate those fences from burning, then we would eliminate house-to-house combustion. So the town took a novel approach to saying use some other material other than wood where it attaches to the house. It's these little things that the town did that I think will be very helpful in the future. It's not a heavy-duty building standard. It's not a lot. It doesn't put a lot of stress on the developer or the homeowner. And I think it was a good move. But there's a lot less in town that you need to do in terms of building standards, but there's some.
And during the fires, when the firefighters were in the backyards throwing everything that was flammable into the streets and the cul-de-sacs, they were tearing down all the fences between the houses. And a little bit worried that the homeowners would come home and be upset that all their fences were torn down. And I said, oh no, you saved their home. I'll talk to them if they're upset.
Well, this is really fantastic. We've got like 22 more questions. So unfortunately, we're not going to be able to answer all of them online. We can certainly provide those questions to our speakers, and maybe if they have time can respond in writing later. We could potentially go a few more minutes depending on the panelists' time. Matt and Deb, do you have a few more minutes, or do you think we should?
Certainly.
Okay, well, let's go. Let's say 5 more minutes. It's 1:04 right now. There's a question here from Molly Mowry. Were the vineyards irrigated? Was that a factor in changing the fire behavior?
That is an excellent question, because, and I don't know much about that business, but yes, they were irrigated. But we are seeing a lot more, I guess, organic, or I'm not sure the right term. Deb can help me with this, but
it's called dry farming.
Yeah, dry farming and less pesticides and things like that, which is wonderful for the environment. But then you see a little bit more weed growth, and you see a little bit more fuels amongst those vineyards. But they were irrigated, yes. Okay, great. Well, I know people are dropping off, so let's have one last question, which I'm happy to field from Virginia Mahachek, who is in the thick of the fire resiliency planning right after the fires. Virginia's question is, can you comment on how the early evacuations allowed the firefighters to do their jobs effectively? So evacuation was critical. We had a town that got it. They understood it. They got out. They packed up. They just did a great, phenomenal job. They also were given heads up that they had time to evacuate, and that was really helpful. So that allowed the firefighters to go to what they call their second objective. Their first objective is human and health and the care of humans. The second one is the firefight. So they could go right to the firefight. But some people didn't evacuate, and I'm glad that she brought that up, because one important factor that I would love to leave with people is, if you don't evacuate your neighborhood, I can't order aircraft drops on those neighborhoods. I can't order aircraft anywhere near you. So because these are so robust, these airdrops, it could kill people. So we would have to divert aircraft if people don't evacuate. So evacuations are huge.
Well, I'm so sorry. We're going to have to end it there. We will try to capture the other questions and we'll follow up. This has been recorded, so we will be able to share the link in case you want to review or share it with others. Greenbelt Alliance wants to thank again Matt Gustafson and Deb Fudge for taking the time to share their stories with us. And if you would like to contact Greenbelt Alliance, you can find us at greenbelt.org. I'm in Santa Rosa. You can certainly find Deb at the Town of Windsor and Matt at the Sonoma County Fire Protection District. So thank you all so much for joining, and hoping you're all staying healthy and safe, and take some time now to get prepared as we move into the wildfire season.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.